Greetings, one and all. Here's another AIOCS conversation, and I hope that you enjoyed watching the previous ones. Now we are at number 46 or so. Time flies, and I'm really honored and um, I'm full of joy for catching up once again with Professor Neil Ormerod. Hi, Neil.
Professor Doru. Hi.
Oh, no, no, no. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. First, thank you for your support.
Uh,
Without
uh,
your support over
my pleasure.
all the years, yeah, I would have not gotten here. But let's talk about you, not me. Uh, yeah, it has been great actually catching up the other day, and
Mm,
this is how the idea of this conversation uh, came to me. As a matter of fact, the viewers know that you've been already twice present in the IS conversation series. Uh, Early when we started, actually, let me
yep,
just share
uh,
the screen to see where we are at. So now that was number 45 a week or so ago.
yeah.
And Neil was my guest when we started, like 3 years or so ago.
There
See,
I am.
number nine.
Providence.
Yeah, Providence,
Yeah.
Freedom, and Responsibility. And earlier, number six, it was Theological Method, Philosophy, and the Sciences. So
Wow.
I'll put I'll put the links in the description of this video when it's uploaded, and the viewers will be able to return to those earlier conversations.
Mm,
Yeah, so after 3 years now from our previous one, although
yeah.
I think I have a fair idea of what you're doing. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's good to give our audience a sense of, well, the life of a theologian in 21st century Australia. Well, already 25 now. And what better way to begin, which what I hope to be a series of conversations of this sort, um, is inviting Neil back. And yeah, so I won't be going to the whole biography thing. I know some of my viewers don't quite like that because they think they can find the right information. But I usually offer sound information
Mm,
about my guests. And those of you who haven't seen yet the previous conversations, please go there, number six, number nine, and you'll find links to Neil's biography, various facets of his work, and of course, a bit of description there. What's the point of this uh, current conversation? I was thinking of going through um the routine of modern theologians. And Neil is a prominent Catholic theologian, well known around the world, and you'll have a taste of it in a moment. And for those of you viewers who haven't kept tab on his whereabouts and dealings and doings, uh, I believe that we should begin with the kind of retrospective of the last few years, if possible. If not, just a few updates. I remember from our conversation the other day, that was a private conversation over lunch in a
yes.
pleasant setting. So
Yes. Very proud.
I won't discuss that one further. But during that conversation, we talked about Neil's recent keynote address in Rome at a Lonergan conference, and I'd like him to say a few words about this and something that I didn't know. A project of writing a textbook on the Holy Trinity. Can you give us some insights into these two, Neil, and anything else you feel like? So
Yeah,
that's part of Neil's professional kind of input to the
activities.
world.
Yeah, yeah. Look, the Boston paper was a bit of a sort of anomaly, really, in the sense that it was a problem I've been sitting on for close to 40 years. Um, there's a little 3 or 4 lines in Bernard Lonergan's major work, Insight. And even at the time, because I had a strong maths and science background, I felt, yeah, I don't know whether that's right. It's an interesting speculation about the link between metaphysics and physics, and what we might identify the sort of classical Aristotelian Thomistic notion of prime potency or prime matter. How might we identify that? And Lonergan proposed that energy might be a good place to start. And he brought in discussions about Lagrangian mechanics and Hamiltonian mechanics, both of which I'd studied. And around the same time, I was doing what a young academic would do at that time, which is just wander through libraries sections, particularly maths and physics, and pick up books at random and just see what they had to say. And I picked up one which had an essay by David Bohm, which I haven't been able to locate. So, I don't think I've fantasized it. But Bohm suggested that the correct identification, because Bohm had this sort of Aristotelian, was in this Aristotelian phase of prime potency, should be action. And that sat much better with me because of the link with the well-known physical principle of least action, which is a bit of a misnomer, but that's what it gets called. So my paper at Boston was to try and convince the one person in the room who would understand what I was talking about that the correct identification of prime potency should be action. It did actually result in a very interesting conversation. There were a few other people there who had some idea of what was going on. And I don't know that I did convince him, but at least I nudged him, and he's taking the suggestion seriously. Some of it is because the sources that Lonergan used and the work that this guy is doing himself are still grounded in the early phases of quantum mechanics, whereas the real revolution in quantum mechanics was quantum field theory. And that's made possible by Richard Feynman and the use of Feynman diagrams. And it's just changed the whole field. But they still have a central role for what's called the Lagrangian. And the Lagrangian is basically a principle of least action. So I made the case. It was interesting exercise, but it was sort of one of those things that, was itching under my skin for a long time. I don't know what I'll do with it, or would it even be of interest to people who are not Lonergan scholars? But it was good fun. It was good fun. Yeah. So that was, as I say, a little bit anomalous.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you, Neil. It's been fun reading it, and thank you very much for sending it to me. I was looking at some pages of hieroglyphics, uh, Neil's equations there, and that was so fascinating. Of course, I was able to make a sense of it, especially in the, let's call it, more narrative parts of the paper and the conclusions. And yeah, I found it interesting that you said towards the end, well, we cannot expect people to be prophets or something to that effect. He was a man of his time. He was aware of the fact that physics was at some point
Yes.
during his time, and
Yeah.
We cannot expect him or to
To transcend
predict.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was very fair. But the thing is, a great theologian and thinker like Lonergan, feeling the need to engage the available sciences.
Ah, yes,
That's
absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah.
And
Lonergan
you
was
brought us
once
up.
asked, well, Lonergan was once asked, what would be a good preparation for a theologian to study? What should they study before they study theology? He said physics.
Wow. Well,
Uh,
see, a classical formation, because as a matter of fact, this is how, if we look back at the ancient
yeah, it
Christian
was more
thinkers,
than that.
yeah,
He felt the need for people to understand explanatory knowledge. And this is, I think, something that's really lost in contemporary theology, that the terms that we use can be technical and explanatory. We're really, to my mind anyway, in a phase where there's this notion that all theological language is metaphorical. Well, even as a proposition, if you tried to prove that, you'd need a non-metaphorical theory of meaning.
true.
You need a technical theory of meaning to be able to make that assertion. So it's a sort of one of these self-refuting statements. The great theological tradition and the great advances, and I always have Thomas Aquinas as my go-to guy, perhaps for you it's Maximus the Confessor, is the fact that he had a technical language and he deployed it, and it enabled him to make a great achievement, which people still read now, 800 years later, and still benefit from now, 800 years later, because it had explanatory power. And there's at present this sort of all theological language is metaphorical. Well, if it is, you can argue endlessly about everything, because you have this meaning, I have this meaning, it's all metaphorical. There's no resolution to be had. So that's sort of, I suppose, part of my the second part of what you're asking me, which is turning to writing textbook on the Trinity.
Isn't based on Thomas Aquinas, isn't it?
Well, look, it's
Or
not
I
quite.
misunderstood you.
It's meant as a first course. It is in the Catholic tradition, I should say. I'm not moving too much out of my comfort zone, but it has a historical. It goes through the historical movements up to a certain point, but it's not an exercise in historical theology. It's an exercise in systematic theology. So it's always asking, what questions were they asking and how did they try and answer them? And do their answers make sense? Like, as if trying to sort of, if a theologian makes a suggestion, and say in the early church, a good one is, I think, Irenaeus, the Father and the Son and the Spirit are the two hands of the Father. Now, that's a nice image, but it really has. Yeah, it is, but it has no explanatory power.
Yeah, true.
You could say it's inherently subordinationist. You could say it's implicitly modalist. All sorts of things you could say that are wrong with it. But you've got to have a critical reading of any of the sources that you read. So one of the things I'm trying to do in this book is say, as we go through these historical phases, let's read what these people actually said. So let's read some of Athanasius. Let's read some of the early creeds of the church and see what they're saying and how they're configured. The baptismal formulae, all that sort of stuff. then the Cappadocians. Let's read excerpts from them and see how they're grappling with the issues. What are the questions they're asking? What are the answers they're trying to come up with? So that we do that as an ongoing conversation of question and answer. Augustine is building on the Cappadocians, whether the Eastern people like that or not. He is. He takes what they say seriously, and he grapples with his work, De Trinitate, which is really perhaps the most extended grappling with the question of the Trinity in the early church. Just to focus, 15 books on the question of the Trinity. And it's quite a structured work. It's a very, very structured work. He knew what he was doing. But then to look at Aquinas, after Aquinas, I look at the Reformation era, which was a new thing for me. So looking at Luther, Calvin, and Schleiermacher. And interesting to see that both Luther and Calvin were very strictly orthodox in their Trinitarian belief.
Orthodox in a Catholic way.
Yeah, in a Catholic way. Yeah, they took the early councils, and they knew, particularly Calvin, knew the early church fathers, knew Augustine, but because they'd let the sort of genie out of the bottle by saying Scripture alone, they found that various followers of the Reformation were departing from that sort of Orthodox tradition, that Western tradition, and were coming up with modalists and Sabellian and all those different heresies. They were all cropping up. So their work was basically defensive. They were saying, look, this is the Trinity we believe in. And by the time you get to Schleiermacher, it's, well, anything goes. I mean, he's back to a sort of Sabellian position, which, yeah. So it's I describe it as a trajectory of decline. And I think part of the decline is both Luther and Calvin say we're not interested in speculation. And if you're not interested in speculation, then you lose. They're very strong on asserting the doctrine, but didn't give people much way to how to understand it. So, and when people don't understand it, well, it then seems unintelligible. I have a story which I may have told you before, but it really struck me at a time. I was at an iftar dinner during Ramadan. It was a public event at New South Wales State Parliament. And at the table I was sitting at, there was a young Muslim guy. So we started talking. And he said, well, my mother was a Catholic and my father was a Muslim. And they just let me decide for myself what I should do. And he said, the one thing I couldn't get my head around was doctrine of the Trinity. Didn't make sense. So I started asking Catholics what it meant. And he said, I even asked a bishop. And he said, none of them could give me any sort of explanation. So I thought, well, if you don't know it, if you don't understand it, why should I believe it? And he became a Muslim. And it really struck me that most, and again, I say this again, often in class, it's not that everyone has to understand it, but if no one understands it, if no one can give a coherent account of it, then it becomes meaningless. And that's a problem. Then people say, well, why bother? Why bother? So part of my task as a now semi-retired theologian with too much time on my hands and not enough energy is to say, well, I've taught this course. I think it's one of the first courses I taught when I was a theologian. So close on 40 years ago. I've been teaching this course on and off in different institutions, in different settings. Maybe it's time to sort of put together a book which could be used as a textbook and designed as a textbook, not designed as a series of lectures, which I think I've read various textbooks, and they're just sort of, this is a whole lot of stuff on the Trinity. You know, they go through, they do it historically or whatever. They don't teach a student how to think. They don't sort of give them critical tools. And they rarely, if ever, give them the original source material.
Yeah.
They usually give potted summaries. So, you know, they'll do the capitations in 5 pages. Well, they've just got potted summaries of what they say. And same with Augustine, and maybe 10 pages for Aquinas, but that's it, you know. And the students never actually read what their original source material is. The book may sort of suggest that they do, but I want them to actually read some of these people.
Yeah, I hear you, Neil. In my line of thought, you know, I mainly do patristics with some caveats to add to that, but no time for it now. And I'm amazed of the amount of this kind of production. A lot of people, perhaps to make some money or whatever, slap together these booklets you know, patristics in whatever in 10 minutes or something like that. Without even indicating, you know, look, this guy that I'm talking about now wrote this and that on this topic. Now, it's a summary like half a page or whatever. You have to take that for granted, okay? Because it comes from I don't know what name, and you end up not knowing anything about the supposed sources of that textbook, you know. So it's great what you do, because we all need to know the actual sources, and it's interesting your approach, you know, on the one hand the historical dimension, on the other hand the systematic, you know, bringing things together. Very much look forward to see it in print.
Well, I've got a publisher interested. They've given me positive signs. I got an email last week saying, just wanted to let you know we're moving, you know, we are getting there. Everything's positive so far. They haven't done the final thing, but they're so. And I think it's, you know, talk about me as a theologian. There are many ways in which I feel not being in the classroom or even employed, I don't get the intellectual stimulation that I had when I was in the academy that helped me be so productive. So
you published like 18 books or so.
Now I'm drawing on my experience to say, what can I do? What am I interested in doing? And one thing I might be able to do is write textbooks which convey the sort of approach that I have as a way of encouraging a more critical approach to theological writing. As I said, that a lot of writing is metaphorical. It's almost poetic, and there's a place for that. I was saying there's not a place for that, and I think that's where people get caught up in the sort of poetry of it and the imagery of it, and that's a good thing for people to have. But I think it's also important that theology have an explanatory basis and not just be image piled on image, piled on image.
Yeah, and I believe that you are onto something because uh, my familiarity with early Christian theologians tells me that in reality the metaphor is supposed to come after explanation. First, you have a discourse.
Yeah,
Then you present that discourse for whatever audiences are more sensitive
yeah,
to that kind of discourse, with poetic
yeah,
licenses,
yeah.
imagery, and so on and so forth. But that imagery would never replace the
No,
discourse.
no, no,
Um,
no.
I mean,
It's
yeah,
it's an important communicative function,
yeah,
but it's got to come out of what is a well formulated, uh, systematic understanding or clear understanding of what you're talking about. In as much as we can have clear understanding. And yes, it's mystery and all that sort of stuff. But we can't absolve ourselves from seeking to understand simply because it's a mystery. It's what should spur us on to find understanding.
yeah,
Uh, that's the Anselmian thing. Theology is faith-seeking understanding. It's not theology is faith-seeking metaphor.
yeah,
It's understanding. And that's, as I say, that's where the Lonergan's idea that, if you want to be a theologian, study physics. It's not because the physics itself is important. It's because you learn what it is to understand.
and it disciplines the mind.
It disciplines the mind.
Yeah.
It
Well,
disciplines the
yeah. Before we move on to the next page, the
mind.
next aspect of this conversation, just to remind, say, the audiences that come from my brand of Christianity,
Yeah,
um, the fact that one of the perhaps least appreciated theologians of the classical Byzantine era, John of Damascus, least appreciated. Why? Because he doesn't have the genius of Maximus, a generation before him, or something like that. He's considered an epitomizer, someone who summarizes stuff. But that's a very superficial
yeah,
approach. And John of Damascus has this trilogy. So he built a trilogy,
right.
a fountain of knowledge. And the first stage, the first part of the trilogy is actually um, what he calls chapters on knowledge.
All right, yeah.
And the preface of the chapters on knowledge uh, says we should first learn to think.
Yes.
Hence the importance of this booklet,
Yeah,
piling up logical devices,
yeah, yeah,
thinking you, helping you to think, and so on and so forth. And then you move on to the
yeah,
next pages.
yeah, yeah,
So what you are saying is perhaps the intuition of all great theologians
yeah,
across the
yeah.
spans of history that you can't be a theologian without having a mind equipped for seeking, thinking,
Yeah, yeah,
praising,
yeah.
weighing, understanding, and then communicating.
Look, I think that's part of the. It used to be part of seminary training in the Catholic tradition. That the first 3 years you studied philosophy, and then you did 4 years of theology. So it was a 7-year program. Now it's a 5-year program, and the theology and the philosophy are done together. Now, there are probably some advantages to that, but there are also disadvantages that the students don't really. Well, there were certainly disadvantages with the old way that they didn't see what the point was. They rarely understood what they were doing philosophy for. And then they do their theology, and there was a disconnect between them. But now they're sort of woven together. I still think you can do a Bachelor of Theology in the Catholic tradition now without doing any philosophy at all. And I think that's not a good thing.
Yeah. which is indeed problematic across the spectrum, including in orthodox educational whatever settings.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
by the way, just one example to along the same lines. One of my friends, former doctoral students, who finished a few years back and had his dissertation published as a book this
yeah,
year, actually. Uh, keeps telling me the same thing. So working on one of the targets was Cyril of Alexandria. Working on Cyril, I realized that I cannot understand, I cannot fathom a lot of what he says because I don't have the philosophical equipment
yeah,
he had.
yeah, yeah,
So our perception today that we can just get to theology, the good stuff,
yeah,
without the preparation and the training
yeah,
of the mind that philosophy
yeah,
um, helps us with
yes.
is self-deluded, and it'll end up, transforming theology into some kind of I don't know what you said before that, a string
Yeah,
of beads
metaphors.
of beads of metaphors. We look at them and fine, okay, next.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's about fair. And as I say, I mean, there's something really good about that because it can move us. And religion isn't, faith isn't an intellectual exercise, but it does have an intellectual component,
Yeah.
and that's what I focus on. And you actually, I think, pay a personal price for that, because I find it difficult to appreciate the sort of more poetic and metaphorical and imagery. It leaves me cold, because I've spent my career, or as much as I can, focusing on the explanatory. And so, I find a lot of forms of popular piety just don't move me.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
I,
not
I
interesting.
hear you. And of course, there's room for all of us
Yeah,
in the city, the
yeah,
theologian, the less theologian,
yeah.
the no
But
theologian.
you're a pastor too. I mean, you get that grounding in having to deal with people.
I try to
Uh,
be very intellectualist in my dealings
uh,
with my bunch. Hence, my flock. Speaking of
uh,
pastors,
uh,
my flock is very limited.
uh,
Actually reduced to people who actually are seeking to understand.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not very popular and successful at this point. So you won't be seeing me with the crocodile shoes and whatever the usual
The
attire
latest
and
Mercedes Benz.
the limos and that. Yeah, okay, yes. Next page.
Yes.
Okay, but yeah, look, there are forms of even doing theology, and of course, uh, okay, but I won't be getting there. I mean, there are some theologians who actually did also poetic work and
Yes.
tried to sort of translate the discourse lyrically,
Yeah.
some of them more successfully than others.
Yes.
But of course, as I said, there's room in the city for everybody.
Yeah.
Now, let's move to the other Neil Ormerod.
Yeah.
Because listeners or viewers who have been part of this conversation, passively, of course, uh, so far, uh, can make the idea in their mind that, well, this guy is actually what we believe the theologian is, living in some abstract world where he's trying to make sense of the Trinity and I don't know what
Uh,
other things.
uh,
And we'll never meet this guy. There's no common ground.
uh,
Well, that's a false assumption when it comes to the great theologian Neil Ormerod, my guest. Why? It's because, and this is the second part of our conversation, because Neil consistently, and I know this from his personal confession, even before he became an academic theologian, he was very much involved in, let's call it, let's call it politics, but it's not politics. It's more like public
public
attitude.
discourse. public
Public
discourse.
discourse. Okay,
Yeah,
so Neil is actually very present, and some of us who actually follow his thinking and writing and various stances, public stances, know that he writes frequently letters to the Sydney Morning Herald. They are
yeah.
published there, sometimes edited, sometimes non-edited, and Neil has a lot to say about that too. But the thing is, he is present in the public arena. And there's
Yeah,
also, of course, your work together with Thea on environmental grounds.
yeah, yeah,
Would you like to share something about the two aspects?
yeah,
Your
yeah.
letters and your ecological involvement.
Yeah, look, one of the things I discovered early on, like even when I was at school, is that I can write really well. Um,
The
I think,
famous Ormerodian style.
yeah,
I think
it's
I read at some point a what was it, a report on a doctoral thesis or something, and the reviewer said this looks like the Ormerodian style.
uh, yeah. Look, I have a way with words. And I think the mathematical side of me thinks through things very, very clearly and values succinct writing. So my writing style is very succinct. Uh, it's the word that everyone uses. Thea always laughs. It's very clear. I have an ability to say things just in a way that people will grasp. And
Wait a
I
minute,
found,
you mean some people are unhappy with the clarity of style?
no, they're usually quite amazed, I think. And
I
I
thought so.
that's something I think is true of my theological writings too. But there's a particular literary form, and I've written. I mean, you highlight the letters to the editor. Um, I've also written for Eureka Street, for Religion and Ethics Online. Uh, and early precursor journals which have gone out now, like National Outlook, which is a Christian magazine that thrived in the sort of 80s, and then Australian Catholics, which thrived in the 90s for a while. Um, Short opinion pieces, 800 to 1,000 words, and focusing on particular issues, political issues, the intersection of religious and political concerns, because people forget that politics is an ethical arena. It's people seem to think of it as this amoral sort of sphere that's politics. Well, it's an ethical sphere. It's a region where people are making decisions, and wherever people are making decisions, particularly for a large number of other people, that's ethical. And so we as Christians have a perspective that we can bring to bear on that sort of discourse. And it's important that we do. So there's a certain sense in which when I was doing this writing, prior to being a theologian, I was still a Christian. And they're usually informed by Christian understanding, uh, preferential option for the poor, for the dispossessed, for the weakest, uh, taking on the political leaders and pointing out their shortfalling and how they're, particularly if they claim to be Christian and they're not living up to that, is something I've done. But also I've used that public voice to criticise the church, particularly in the area of the sexual abuse crisis. I've been quite vocal on that over decades. About 3 decades now I've been involved in that. Uh, so I think it was Karl Barth who famously said, a theologian should read the Bible every day and the newspapers every day. And I've been an avid reader of newspapers and of politics, even in school, and I've kept that up. But when I was my position as a theologian gave me a sort of platform, to be able to put your institutional, particularly when I was at ACU, and I could identify my institution, which they were happy about, I must say. I remember Greg Craven at one of our academic board meetings saying, and we want Ormerod to be publishing his letters in the Herald, even though, they were often a bit controversial or critical of the church or critical of the state or whatever. That's part of the life of being a public intellectual. And that platform allowed me to contribute to debates with a certain authority. Got me into a couple of bits of hot water at times. So I got some, really ferocious personal assaults, verbal assaults from people who didn't like it because you're a public figure. You talk on immigration, for example, refugees, and you get the most racist sort of personal attacks. One person objected to the fact that I suggested there were limits to free speech, for example. And he was most vociferous. And he said, I'm going to write to your Vice-Chancellor and to your council and tell them that, and I said, oh, okay, well, here's the email address of the Vice-Chancellor. I'll just CC him into this correspondence, because I had no fear that what I was saying was totally in line with Catholic social teaching.
Yeah, so I thought this must have impacted you. I mean, modern Catholicism, after the First Vatican Council, launched this social doctrine, and I
Yes,
think this was instrumental towards, shaping your mind
absolutely,
in this
absolutely.
sort of attentive or yeah, towards attentiveness to things social,
Social,
political, and so on and
yeah,
so forth.
yeah,
And it
absolutely,
makes a lot of sense. I mean, you took it too seriously, perhaps.
yeah. No, I don't think I took it too seriously. It's interesting when we were at high school, junior high school, Catholic Catholic school, and we'd had the old style catechism, which was just question and answer and all that sort of stuff. But in year 9, there was a shift, and suddenly we were discussing social issues. And the teaching brothers who were teaching us religion were reconfiguring their sort of approach to religious education. And it had a big impact on me. It had a big impact on me at that time, and did help form, okay, there's something else going on here in this world of faith beyond, saying prayers and going to church and, doing all the religious things. But there's a mission.
It's
And
embodying the discourse, embodying
yeah,
the word, embodying
yeah,
one's faith
yeah,
into concrete forms of life that actually correspond to what our teacher teaches
yeah,
about being. Yeah.
absolutely. So, and that's, you mentioned the work that Thea and I do in different ways. I mean, Thea is an activist in climate change. She's been running an interfaith organisation now for close on 15 years, the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change. And that's organised sort of groups of religious leaders to go to Parliament House and talk to parliamentarians It's organised nationwide events to promote climate change issues at places of worship. It's been all on a shoestring budget, I should say. They now have one paid worker. Thea's not been paid. She'd put in 40 hours, 50 hours a week doing this work as a volunteer. But she does the sort of the activist thing. I do the academic thing. So I write.
I've seen photos of you of those rallies.
She's, the Newcastle blockade is a big one, but there's an intellectual challenge as well, and a theological one for. And this is, talking about Catholic social teaching. Pope Francis's document Laudato Si, which was just brilliant, because it put an emphasis on the environment as central to our Christian faith at this time. I mean, it's he says, it's no longer a secondary issue. We've got to make it central. And it's a message that a lot of the church in Australia, Catholic Church in Australia, is basically ignoring. There's not well at the top end, I should say, the Episcopal leadership. They just can't get their head around it, I don't think. But the middle management, the people in the Catholic school system, I think they've heard that. And they're introducing it to the school kids and the curriculum and
A different
doing
kind
good
of
work
thinking.
that way. Yeah.
From
But parish life.
them up. Yeah.
Parish life, it's not, there's nothing. There's nothing. Even in our parish, where Thea just has given up because it's just so impossible. But she can run a nationwide organisation and get banners on cathedrals and churches and mosques and synagogues and all that sort of stuff all around Australia.
That's amazing.
But I've looked at, I've written a few articles now on environmental issues, a couple in theological studies, a couple in lesser journals, to try and say, well, what's happening here intellectually? What's the one I'm most proud of is the one I did with a Canadian scholar, Christina Vannon, and we did an article on ecological conversion, because it's a term that I think first used by John Paul II, but given prominence by Francis in his encyclical. And just trying to say, well, what does it mean? What does it mean? What are all the dimensions of it? And using Lonergan, we helped unpack the different dimensions of ecological conversion. And one of my successful doctoral students basically used that article as a template for discussing ecological conversion in the Murray Basin.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, or whenever he graduated. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
His he was exam results were successful. They were very good. They were very positive. So that's been my contribution. I'm the brain, she's the brawn, or she's the activist. I'm the ivory tower academic. Writing. But again, you need both.
Well, of course, but look, I have this feeling, this conviction that you're not just the ivory tower, even though you live there most times.
Yeah.
You make frequent incursions down the stairs, and the fact that you use your time to take stances on the problems of this world, socially,
yeah,
politically, ethically,
yeah, yeah,
environmentally, and so on and so forth, shows that you pay attention to things that unfold, things that
yeah.
happen. And I'd like to conclude this conversation by asking you, Neil, uh, do you believe that the theologian, regardless of how academic he or she might be,
Yeah.
should actually pay attention to this world and try to do something about it?
Look, I think as a Christian we should, and a
So,
theologian,
theologian or otherwise.
yeah, theologian or otherwise, as Christians we are called to do this, and a theologian brings a particular set of skills to that. Um, I have a skill in communication, which I try and use. Uh, Others may not have the same skill, but I think there's incumbent on us all as believers to say, the world is in a mess and we've got to do something about it. We're not just passively waiting for the second coming. Otherwise, it'll be here before we know it. We actually are transformative agents in the world. And there are many ways in which we can act to transform things. And one is sort of socio-politically, and the other is culturally. And theologians are cultural agents, perhaps best of all. We understand the whole history. Well, we're given the task of trying to understand the whole movement of Christian history and the powerful way in which that history has shaped cultures within the world because of the theologians and the saints who contributed to the way in which that world can be transformed. And we're called on always to do that. As Christians, we're called on, but as theologians, we have a particular responsibility. Yeah, I take that seriously as a Christian and bring the theological skills that I have to that, uh, for which I'm grateful. I mean, I don't know what happened chance gave me that set of skills, but I'm more than happy to use it for the best advantage for the kingdom. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dor.
Oh, Professor Ormerod, it's always my pleasure and an honor to
My pleasure too.
listen
My
to you.
pleasure too. And I hope people who listen find it valuable.
Thank you.